It was a bitter December night in 1894 in a small upstate New York farmhouse, far from the bustle of any city. A fire raged through the kitchen of the home of one of the town's prominent families. Flames licked the walls, smoke billowed thick and black, and the heat was so intense it drove neighbors to their knees on the frozen ground outside, watching in horrified disbelief. But what they would discover in the aftermath was far more horrifying than fire alone. Amid the charred ruins, the body of an elderly man lay slumped in his chair, lifeless. Beside him, the remains of his wife, her face twisted in terror, were barely recognizable beneath the ashes, and nearby their daughter, thankfully alive, shook with fear, unable to comprehend how her home, her family, could end like this. The townsfolk whispered the name that had already begun to spread like wildfire through their community: Lizzie Halliday. The woman accused of a series of murders, arsons, and frauds so cold-blooded that newspapers had begun calling her the worst woman on earth. But nobody, not even the local police, truly understood the depths of her depravity. Yet, to understand how a woman could earn such a fearsome title, one must step back decades. Born Elizabeth Lizzie Halliday in 1859 in Ireland, she had been the child of a rough working-class family, raised in poverty and hardship. Her early years were marked by tragedy, cruelty, and a restlessness that would follow her across continents. By her teenage years, Lizzie had already shown signs of violent tendencies: small acts of cruelty to animals, unexplained thefts, and a fiery temper that left those around her uneasy. At 20, she emigrated to the United States, seeking opportunity, or perhaps escape from her past. She married multiple times, each union ending in suspicion, abandonment, or the mysterious death of her husband. By the time she reached the 1890s, Lizzie had built a reputation that alternated between charming and terrifying. Those who met her described a woman of striking appearance. She was tall, with sharp features, pale skin, and piercing gray eyes that seemed to flicker between warmth and menace. Her dark hair, often braided or pinned tightly, gave her an austere, almost statuesque presence. Yet beneath the surface, there was a cunning mind, capable of manipulation and deception beyond what most could imagine. In the months leading to that fateful December night, Lizzie had moved in with the elderly Parsons family. Their home, located on a quiet street in Lyons, New York, was ordinary, quiet, modest, and filled with the routine of middle-class life. But beneath the veneer of normalcy, Lizzie's mind was already spinning a web of deceit and violence. The fire that would reveal her crimes was no accident. Witnesses later reported seeing her in the house late that night, carrying buckets of flammable liquid. Her movements were deliberate, her face unreadable as she poured and ignited the deadly concoction. The blaze consumed the home in minutes, and yet in her cold calculation, she ensured she left enough signs to make the deaths appear accidental, or at least delay suspicion. Neighbors rushed to the scene, summoned by smoke and panic, only to find the horrifying aftermath: the charred bodies, the crackling remnants of a home destroyed, the horror of a life extinguished before it could even end naturally. And standing apart from the chaos, Lizzie was already weaving her next story, a tale of survival and victimhood designed to divert attention from herself. The investigation that followed was swift but not easy. Forensic science in the 1890s was rudimentary, and investigators relied heavily on witness testimony, circumstantial evidence, and the confessions, half-truths, lies, and manipulations of the accused. Lizzie, with her practiced charm and feigned innocence, initially evaded full suspicion. Yet, inconsistencies began to emerge. The pattern of deaths and accidents surrounding her, fire, poisoning, sudden illnesses, was undeniable. Other families, neighbors, and acquaintances whispered darkly of a woman whose presence seemed invariably to bring misfortune and death. By the time authorities began to piece together the evidence, Lizzie Halliday had already constructed her next identity, ready to flee, deceive, and continue her reign of terror. As the flames died down and the smoke cleared, one chilling truth emerged. The Parsons family was only one of many. The full extent of Lizzie Halliday's crimes, the bodies hidden, the husbands who vanished, the schemes that drained fortunes, was only beginning to come to light. And while the townsfolk believed they had glimpsed the worst of her nature, they could not have known just how far her darkness would stretch. What drove a woman to commit such atrocities? Was she insane, calculating, or something far more sinister? And most haunting of all, who would be next? The story of Lizzie Halliday had only just begun. The courtroom was packed. Gas lamps flickered against the high walls of a small upstate New York courthouse, casting long shadows over the faces of townsfolk who had come to witness history in the making. In the defendant's box sat Lizzie Halliday. Her posture was rigid, her expression eerily calm, almost serene, like a statue carved from stone. Yet beneath that calm was a storm of calculation. Around her, the townspeople whispered accusations. Arson, murder, fraud. Some said she was insane. Others called her the devil incarnate. But no one could deny the chilling truth. This woman had left a trail of death in her wake that stretched across years and states. And now, the evidence was about to confront her. As the trial commenced, the prosecution laid bare the horrifying details of her life. They recounted the sequence of husbands, lovers, and elderly companions who had vanished under suspicious circumstances. They spoke of fires that conveniently occurred in homes where Lizzie had recently resided, of sudden illnesses that struck down the unsuspecting, and of the small fortunes she collected through deceit and manipulation. It was a lifetime of crime meticulously woven together. And yet, for many in the courtroom, the most disturbing detail wasn't the sheer number of her offenses. It was the apparent calm with which she executed them. Lizzie Halliday did not strike in a fit of rage or desperation. She struck with purpose, precision, and above all, patience. Witnesses were called, neighbors, family members, former acquaintances. Each testified to her charm, her seemingly normal demeanor, and the sudden inexplicable tragedies that followed her. Some described her laughing with them one day, only to vanish the next as misfortune struck those she touched. Others told of her cold eyes, flickering with something unnameable, a mix of cruelty, cunning, and indifference to human suffering. Through witness testimony and investigative reports, the courtroom pieced together Lizzie's methods. She was a master manipulator. She used poison to eliminate inconvenient husbands, fires to destroy evidence and intimidate neighbors, and false tales of victimhood to disarm suspicion. In one particularly chilling account, she had moved in with an elderly man under the guise of caretaking. Over weeks, she gained his trust, learned his habits, and then, without a moment's hesitation, poisoned him, collecting his pension and leaving the house to burn, ensuring no trace of her guilt remained. Her cunning was matched only by her audacity. At times, she would feign shock and grief at tragedies she herself had orchestrated, all while scheming her next move. She exploited the limited legal understanding of female criminality, knowing authorities would underestimate her capacity for violence simply because she was a woman. As the trial progressed, journalists descended upon Lyons and surrounding towns, eager to report on every grisly detail. Newspapers painted Lizzie as a demon in human form, the worst woman on earth, a title she would not contest, either through acknowledgement or denial, but through silence and inscrutable stares. Psychologists and physicians of the era were called to assess her sanity. Some argued she was insane, driven by delusions or uncontrollable impulses. Others insisted she was cunning, fully aware of her actions, and entirely responsible. The debate raged, reflecting both the limitations of 19th century forensic psychology and the shocking novelty of a woman committing such a relentless spree of calculated murders. The community was left grappling with the implications. Could someone so outwardly ordinary harbor such malevolence? Could evil reside behind charm, smiles, and domesticity? Lizzie Halliday forced townsfolk to confront a terrifying reality. Appearances could not be trusted, and evil could wear the face of the familiar. By the end of the trial, one fact was undeniable. Lizzie Halliday had claimed more victims than anyone could immediately account for. Bodies had been hidden, fires had destroyed homes, and papers detailing her schemes had vanished or been deliberately falsified. Even as the jury prepared to deliberate, whispers spread through the courthouse. There were rumors of other disappearances of other towns where Lizzie had lived, of families she had infiltrated and destroyed. Some believed she had a network of lies and identities ready, waiting for the moment she would vanish from justice's reach once more. And as the gavel fell for the day, the question loomed. Would Lizzie Halliday finally pay for her crimes? Or would she slip into the shadows again, leaving behind only bodies, ashes, and terror? The story was far from over. It was a gray, drizzling morning in Auburn, New York, when the authorities finally cornered Lizzie Halliday. Her reputation had preceded her, a woman so cunning, so ruthless, that she had evaded full justice for years. But in this quiet town, there was no escaping the law. As officers entered the modest boarding house where she had been hiding under yet another alias, Lizzie's expression remained inscrutable. Her piercing gray eyes met theirs calmly, betraying nothing. She said nothing as they read her rights. In that moment, she was neither monstrous nor human. She was simply a shadow of the chaos she had left behind. In the years before her arrest, Lizzie's crimes had escalated in boldness. She had moved from small domestic murders and arsons to carefully calculated schemes designed to drain fortunes. Families who trusted her were left destitute, widows were poisoned, and elderly men met suspicious ends. She had assumed multiple identities, leaving townsfolk to wonder if she was everywhere at once, an unstoppable specter of death. Investigators pieced together her movements, from Lyons to various towns in New York and Vermont, leaving behind a trail of burned homes, missing persons, and unexplained deaths. Newspapers sensationalized her story, calling her the worst woman on earth, and vilifying a type of evil that many believed could not reside in a woman. Her trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed with townsfolk, journalists, and lawmen eager to see justice meted out. Witnesses recounted in detail the horrors Lizzie had wrought. Every act, every death, every fire painted a picture of a woman whose cunning and cruelty seemed almost beyond comprehension. Medical experts testified on her mental state. They debated whether Lizzie was insane. Some argued that her remorseless violence and manipulations indicated psychopathy, while others claimed she was fully aware and calculating, simply exploiting the limits of the law and the biases against women in crime. Lizzie listened silently, occasionally glancing at the jury with an unreadable expression. Was it arrogance, calm detachment, or an understanding of her own legend taking shape? The prosecution laid bare some of her most chilling schemes. One elderly victim had been slowly poisoned over weeks, their suffering unnoticed, because Lizzie feigned caregiving. Another family home had gone up in flames, destroying not only property, but also evidence of her previous crimes. Each witness and each piece of evidence added layers to her story. She was not impulsive. She was strategic, predatory, and frighteningly intelligent. Some accounts revealed her almost theatrical manipulation of emotions. She could feign vulnerability, charm, and affection with uncanny precision, drawing in victims who trusted her completely. And yet, behind that facade lay a woman whose empathy seemed entirely absent, replaced by calculation and self-interest. Eventually, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty. The weight of her crimes, combined with the overwhelming evidence and testimony, left no room for doubt. Lizzie Halliday was sentenced to life imprisonment at the New York State Asylum for the criminally insane in Auburn. Yet even as she was led away, whispers persisted. Could someone like her ever truly be contained? Could a mind so cunning, so devoid of empathy, ever be understood or rehabilitated? In prison, Lizzie lived out her remaining years under strict supervision. She rarely spoke, and when she did, her words were measured, calm, and chillingly detached. She became a study in criminal psychology, an example of female predation and calculated evil that would intrigue experts for decades. The story of Lizzie Halliday left a lasting mark. She had shattered families, defied societal expectations of women, and left communities grappling with the terrifying reality that evil could hide behind charm, domesticity, and femininity. Historians and criminologists would later debate her motives. Greed? Vengeance? Pure psychopathy? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between. One thing remains certain. Lizzie Halliday, the woman called the worst on earth, left a shadow that lingers even more than a century later. Her life and crimes are a grim reminder that appearances deceive, that evil wears many faces, and that history often preserves not only the actions of the guilty, but the fear they inspire. And while she eventually met the limitations of law and confinement, her story continues to fascinate, horrify, and unsettle, a true testament to the darkest corners of human nature.